So I am Annette Hines. Welcome. I'm the host of this event, and
I am Dr. Ingrid Amorini-Klimek, and I am collaborating with Annette here today. And we will be talking about a lot of different but very interesting issues that have to do with returning to life after this COVID pandemic, especially when it comes to going back to school. It's a very nerve-wracking experience right now for a lot of us.
We are going to focus on school, but we're also going to touch on returning to adult programs as well, which Ingrid and I both have a lot of experience with. So I'm going to give about 30 seconds of my background because most of you who are joining probably know a little bit about my background, but I am a mom and an attorney and an advocate, and I am an author as well as a speaker and just an all-around very involved special needs gal. So Ingrid, would you like to give a little bit of your background as well?
Something very similar to you. I'm an all-around special needs person. I always say that that's pretty much what my life is about. I don't see my life going in any other direction. And just like you, Annette, it has to do with the fact that I'm a family member. I grew up with my brother with developmental disabilities. He was born when I was 7 years old, so I pretty much spent all my life knowing, learning, understanding these issues. I wear other hats as well. I've been a school administrator, district administrator for a large education department in New York. I'm an early intervention instructor. I'm an educational psychologist. I'm also an advocate. And I'm also a founder and president of a nonprofit called the Bocha Project, where we help other organizations around the world promote inclusion and inclusive practices.
That is really cool. As we are having people file into the webinar, I can't let this week go by without making note that it is the 30th anniversary. 30 years ago on Sunday, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush. So exciting. I know that we still have a long way to go, but so much has happened over the last 30 years. And I wanted to tell a little story about a young woman, a brave young woman from my town, Natick, Massachusetts, who changed the face not only of our town, but changed the face of education. She, at 14 years old and only 8 short years after the law was passed, did something in our town, sued our town, and was the first case where punitive and compensatory damages were ever awarded under the ADA in a public education domain. So I want to spend just a minute telling you about her case. At 14, she showed up to our high school in a wheelchair. She's a very smart young woman, and she came up through the middle school, and her parents and she had been planning with the town for her arrival, and they were told that everything would be all set for her because transition planning is very important. We all know that. And when she showed up, a number of her classes that she needed, she was a very smart girl and she needed some advanced classes that she wanted to take. They were all on the second floor. No elevator, not accessible to her. And she was told, oh, well, we're not going to change the schedule of the classes around for one person. And, you know, you can't take them this year. You would think it wouldn't be that difficult to move some classes around for one person or to have planned in advance for her, but no, our town fought tooth and nail. She sued. This was not her parents' idea. This was her idea, and I know this for a fact because I know this family. My daughter, this was in 1998. My daughter was born in 1996, and we had just moved into this town and when this lawsuit was starting, and this was our welcome. And it was so exciting to know that we had arrived in the right place, and my daughter being 2, I knew that that we were gonna be in the right realm for her. So the thing is, Angeli Forber-Pratt, who started this lawsuit, she knew that this was going to be a long road, and this lawsuit was not for her, because by the time she was done, she was going to be out of high school, because lawsuits like this take a long time. And she was doing this for the rest of us. She was doing this for my Elizabeth, who was only 2, and for the Elizabeths in wheelchairs who came after her. And our town hired lawyers and paid good money to fight her, to stop just having to move some classes around. That's what they did, right?
Unbelievable.
But she won, and they paid her $110,000 and agreed to correct some of those deficiencies. And eventually, years later, not too many years later, we got a new high school out of it. A new high school that was finally accessible and compliant. And it was great. So I want to remember Angeli for the good work that she did just 8 short years after the ADA was passed, and over 20 years ago, to fight this battle for kids like my Elizabeth and the kids who came after. So thank you, Angeli, for everything she did. She's a professor now at Vanderbilt University.
Amazing.
She was a Paralympic medalist in the London Games. Amazing young woman. So thank you, Angeli, and all the Angelis out there who fought these battles for our kids. Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming to our webinar. We are recording this, and we will be posting it afterwards. Thank you so much for being here. How meaningful during this 30th anniversary of the ADA. So I want to talk to you a little bit about being a mom of my 2 beautiful daughters, Elizabeth and Caroline. My youngest, Caroline, I talk about Elizabeth all the time, my disabled daughter, but my youngest, Caroline, who's 19 now and fabulous, I don't talk about very much, frankly, because she doesn't really like it when I talk about her. But I need to talk about her today because she factors in a lot to this education debate and this education conversation we're going to have. But a little bit about Elizabeth first. Elizabeth was born a 29-week, 2-pound preemie, diagnosed at 2.5 years old with mitochondrial disease, FAOD, and a host of other issues as well. And I know it sounds strange to say that your child was the love of your life, but Elizabeth truly was the love of my life. And she was profoundly intellectually disabled, blind, wheelchair bound, and nonverbal, but her smile just lit up the world. And she and I had a bond that went beyond words. I am truly honored to be here today to talk to you about Elizabeth and about Caroline, and to be speaking with you today about these important issues and about what comes next, because building a world for them has been everything to me, everything. Now, these past 4 months have been very difficult on all of us, but perhaps have hit none harder than, the special needs community, for sure. However, I want to say that this pandemic has given us a unique opportunity to look at our educational system with fresh eyes for our children. I think that together we have learned so much, and Ingrid's going to talk about that in more detail. She's really going to dig in. I want us to put all of our preconceived notions aside about education, wipe the slate clean, and start fresh. Also, let's look at our adult service systems as well while we're at it. Now, I'm not the expert on education. Ingrid is. She's going to talk to you a little bit more about that. So I don't pretend to have all the answers, but what I am is a coalition builder. So I'm hoping to inspire you a little bit today to join me in building some coalitions. And what I want to talk to you about is choice and voice. okay? So I want to review a few things that have happened around our country in the last few months. By late March, all the schools across the country were closed. Children had been moved to some form of online schooling or distance learning, and families were forced to choose whether they wanted to bring their residential students and adults with disabilities home for the duration of the pandemic, however long that may be, or they weren't going to be able to see them and spend time with them. Parents, predominantly, I believe most polls had this, well over 90% women were struggling with managing education and care of their children, working from home or at an essential job, and care of their other family members as well. Ingrid and I had quite a talk about this when we first did our podcast. So the epidemic raged on, starting in the Northeast, and Ingrid's in New York and I'm in Massachusetts, and our states were devastated. Both of our states had the highest losses and deaths. And then it started sweeping through the country. By June, it began to be crushing, and folks questioned what the next steps would be to reopen the country. And that's kind of where we are now. Many school districts struggled to deliver educational services to special needs children, particularly the most challenged children, and children with low incidence or multiple disabilities, children with complex behavioral plans. But then we also heard from families that some children were thriving at home too. Some adults with special needs were also thriving at home. School districts were asking families around the country, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Illinois, to sign away their due process rights, to allow them to suspend certain services under their IEPs that couldn't be delivered virtually. For example, here in Massachusetts, more than 12 school districts had presented waivers to families to sign that allowed the school district to violate federal IDEA timelines for team meetings, evaluations, and implementing the ED plan known as the IEP. Upon hearing this in May, the Federal Department of Education clarified for the states that no school districts should be asking families to sign such waivers of rights. Even still, many families throughout these months have seen de facto violations of their children's IEPs. So what do I mean by that? What's a de facto violation? That delivering the services on these IEPs via an online service is a near impossibility, meaning their kids wouldn't sit down, they wouldn't participate. So even though the service technically was available, it still was not being delivered. The education was not meaningful. It wasn't connecting. There was not really any education that was really being delivered in any way. So many families are considering lawsuits or have started lawsuits against their school districts for denial of FAPE, which is a free and appropriate education for their children. This is the guarantee that our federal government has made to us. It's the contract that we have with them, and frankly, what our tax dollars have paid for. Class action lawsuits are being discussed and sought. One has been filed in New York City, where Ingrid is, and they are claiming plaintiffs already in 20 states, and that is growing. At the same time, school districts have approached their state and federal government to request relief from liability for lawsuits. And those lawsuits are related to the virus on all sorts of levels, from children and adults contracting it on their premises, to failure to deliver services properly under IEPs, and all kinds of other things as well. These waivers vary state by state, and as of right now, school districts have not been issued any waivers from the federal government under IDEA yet, but it's looking pretty good that that might happen. In addition, teachers all over the country are scared to return to work. A lawsuit was filed in Florida against Governor DeSantis last week, arguing that there is no safe way to open the schools. Teachers unions representing their members in other large cities in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, California, and many other states are balking at the plans that cities and towns have come up with regarding the return to the classroom. They're staging various forms of protests right now. And there's a lot of planning going on, and there's not a lot of specificity about how some of this is going to happen. Plans are being rolled out and quickly rolled back in. And, people are very confused right now about what is happening. Again, I know Ingrid's going to talk about this in a little more detail. So parents are fearful as well. They don't know what to think about returning their children to school. And everyone's comfort level is in flux. Families are making plans about what is next for their children. Homeschooling, distance learning, online school with their district. What are we going to do? In response to that, some families are forming education pods. What is this? Small cluster of homeschooling or distance learning families that are grouping together to hire a teacher or a tutor and a curriculum by pooling their resources. So this is keeping exposure to a minimum for a group of kids and their families, as well as the educator. We're going to talk about those pros and cons a little bit. These pods are very much like homeschooling co-ops of the past before the pandemic. They're not a new thing. They're just kind of gaining ground and a little bit more fancy than what they used to be in the past. The thing to remember, through the pandemic, I realized that there's a lot of confusion about all of these terms regarding homeschooling and distance learning, and that people don't really understand, what the differences are. So I thought it would be very valuable to go over that a little bit before we jump into parents making choices about what to offer. And before Ingrid starts getting into it with you about what to ask for in your IEP, I think I'm going to go over a few basics there. So I thought I would tell you a little story about Caroline, the one who doesn't like me to talk about her. Back when my kids were little, homeschooling was a little bit more radical than it is today. And so when my kids were little, I was raising my two daughters mostly alone after an early divorce. And recall that Elizabeth was profoundly disabled and 29-week preemie, very medically fragile. But she was funny and very sweet. And she loved butterflies, which is how I got the name of my book. And being diagnosed with a life-limiting mitochondrial disease at age 2.5, unfortunately, we did lose her when she was 17. But then there was Caroline, my younger daughter. She's 19 now, and she's doing great. But for a while there, Caroline was a beautiful but intense child, and as many special needs siblings can be, she was a mix. So she was also very funny and artistic, and she loved to make movies and sing songs. But when she was younger, she struggled enormously. She was always that kid in the corner who was playing with something else while everybody else was sitting on the story mat listening to a story. She'd be off with the kitchen stuff playing by herself, right? Our home life was busy and tragic, and lots of therapy and nurses, etc., for Elizabeth. And I was like, all the time, like there's no expression for, but you can see me, so you know what I'm doing. And, a lot of you single moms, or maybe just a lot of you parents, are nodding your head with me right now going, yeah, I get it. So you know what I'm saying. But then Caroline found dance, and that was her thing. So she finally had her thing, and she was pretty good at it. So she wasn't the best, but but she was good. She found her way to the middle of the pack. And I thought, this is going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Right. And Elizabeth was getting more medically complex just as we were getting more involved in this dance thing. And Caroline was starting to approach her early tween years. And then we started to learn that some of the kids in this dance program were homeschoolers. And it sounded like a good idea to us. So we dove into the deep end to learn more about homeschooling. So Caroline was in this group of homeschoolers who were homeschooling because they were dancing all the time, and they were doing shows, and they were doing competitive dance. And have you ever wondered how those 15-year-old gymnasts or those actors who are on Broadway can do what they do full time? Homeschooling is how they do it, right? And Ingrid knows because she was also a dancer, right? So she knows. So homeschooling or distance learning is how they do it. And that's how Caroline did it. She danced like 25 to 30 hours a week, and she traveled around and did different things. And the more competitive and the older they get, the more school has to be done a different way. So back then there weren't many homeschooling or distance learning programs to choose from, and we opted for distance learning and used an approved curriculum that was actually affiliated with a public school in our state. And I'll tell you why. So some of the parents were homeschooling truly, where they actually made up the curriculum themselves. I was a crazy mama who was trying to deal with Elizabeth and work and not go bankrupt in my family. So I was not about to try to be the homeschooling mom and make up the curriculum, because to truly be a homeschooler, that's the difference. Homeschooling means you are the teacher. You are coming up with the curriculum yourself, finding, I'm going to use this math program and this math book, or no math book, and I'm just going to teach the math. And then I'm going to use this, literature, and I'm going to teach, science by doing this thing over here. There wasn't a way I was going to do that. And then distance learning means that you are actually just using some other curriculum where you are accessing another teacher, and you are a facilitator. You as the parent are facilitator, or you're hiring a tutor to facilitate. And so you can do that by using a public school program that's a distance learning program, or you can purchase a distance learning program where you have another teacher it's a private school, and they are, grading all of the work and doing all of the teaching for you. So some of those programs are extremely expensive. Even back then, we're talking well over 10, 12 years ago. And those programs were like $5,000 to $8,000 back then. There was no way this chick was going to be able to afford that. Not at all. So I opted for the only homeschool program that was a public school in my state back then. The program was called K-12, and that they're all over the place now, but it was the only one available at the time. And that meant that I got all my stuff for free. We got a free computer. Oh, by the way, no laptop back then. They actually shipped me this desktop computer. It was this big clunky thing. And all of the science equipment, little rocks and a microscope to look at, and the art equipment with the clay and the chalk, and it was great. So we had an actual teacher, and Caroline got online like 2 hours a day around her dance schedule. The teacher graded everything, and I just needed to be the facilitator, assist her with her program, and assist her with her lesson plans. And she got to go as fast as she wanted to in some of her, her different learning, and as slow in others. So we had some flexibility in the distance learning, and we were able to, kind of work with the teacher as we needed to. And if Caroline couldn't make it at a certain time for some class time, that was okay. So that worked out really well, and she got her credits. So it was, we kind of had the best of both worlds with the distance learning. So I wanted to kind of clue you into the difference. My fondest memory of being able to participate in distance learning was that it was so flexible for her. She was definitely a different learner, and again, Ingrid's going to talk about this more, but Caroline was a visual learner like me, and we got to work on a project when we were doing history on the Trail of Tears. And Caroline is actually descended from the Cherokee Indians. Her grandma's a Cherokee Indian. And so it was very meaningful for us. And because she's not a great reader, we actually did, we made up a board game, and we did the Trail of Tears West with a board game where we made up all of these different hazards that the Native Americans, encountered going west. And it was so memorable for her, as opposed to just reading through the lesson plan. And so you get to do things like that when you are not stuck in a classroom with the same 30 kids doing the same thing. Anyway, that was great. It worked out really well. And that kind of brings me to my next point about special needs. So Caroline had her own learning challenges, and those challenges really became clear to me in those 3.5 years that I homeschooled or distance learned with her, and I was her tutor and her facilitator, because I found out about Caroline's executive function issues during that time, and I was able to not personally provide for that because I didn't have the skill set, but I brought in some extra help for her once I could see it. None of her teachers in her public school before that clued me in that she was having difficulty. And when I was able to see it for myself, it was so helpful to understand where she was at, and to be able, because she was a bright girl, but she was frustrated, and to be able to provide some specific support for her learning style and to set her up for success when she got to high school, it was invaluable. So I wanted to offer that as such a great outcome for being able to be there and distance learn with her. So being able to participate in those lessons with her was amazing. And I think some of you are finding also, though, that maybe your children are not making progress at home, and that's okay too. I've been hearing that from you. So I wanted to mention about pods. Pods worry me quite a bit because, they're probably not going to work for more profoundly impaired children, and they're probably not going to work for families with limited means. I think that they pose a real threat to pull talented teachers and therapists and other ancillary educators away from our school systems to private people who can pay on a much larger scale than before. I think folks, teachers, et cetera, are concerned about their health and well-being, and they're going to find this attractive because it's going to limit their exposure. So I'm very worried that seeing this pop up is going to really it's going to pull diversity out of our system even more than before. So another thing that I wanted to mention is that, tragically, many educators and the general public do look down on homeschooling due to cultural bias. So just before the pandemic hit, Harvard Law School had announced an event to discuss homeschooling, and I quote, "The focus will be on problems of educational deprivation and child maltreatment that too often occur under the guise of homeschooling." I myself had many discussions with friends and family alike, as well as my school system, about educating Caroline at home. There is such a strong bias that homeschoolers are inferior, do not learn their basic skills, and are indoctrinated with scary ideologies in the backwoods of America. I kid you not, these articles are out there. And for example, by Harvard Law professor Elizabeth Bartholet, who quite literally equates homeschooling with child abuse. And you only need to read Tara Westover's best-selling memoir to be convinced of it. But what do they think now that COVID is here and there are no good options and everybody is homeschooling? Now all of a sudden, homeschooling is the best thing since sliced bread. And of course, all of the services that are being delivered at home are wonderful, right? So, you know, it's very confusing for everybody. So I want to make sure that on a global level, parents understand their rights. All 50 states recognize the rights of parents to homeschool their children. And although there isn't an exact constitutional right to homeschool, there are protections for parents under the 1st, 9th, and 10th Amendments to the Constitution. There are several Supreme Court and Court of Appeals cases that deal with this subject, recognizing parents' rights to educate their children at home. And there are several things to consider as you're developing your plan, which Ingrid is going to get into. I want you to understand this because I want parents to know that they have choice and their voices need to be heard in developing their plan. The bottom line is this: if you are not comfortable with how things are set up for your child in school, you have options. Your child is entitled to a free and appropriate education under IDEA. That includes, under some circumstances, homeschooling and distance learning. But it also includes protections and accommodations under the ADA and numerous other state laws as well. Under our current situation, your team is fractured, and more than ever, you're the hub and the gatekeeper, right, of all the information about your child. So as tired as you are, and with all the hats that you're wearing, it's going to be your job to lead this integration back to school successfully. And this is the time to pull out your best communication and leadership skills. So with that, I want to turn this over to Ingrid, and I want to have her talk to you about how to do that.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for that wonderful talk, Annette. Love to have the perspective of someone with a law background. You know, my years as an administrator, I would say to parents, well, the law protects you, and this is what the law says, and this is what the law says. But obviously, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an educator. I'm a psychologist. But I knew very well what the law said and how it protected parents. So I really appreciate everything that you said.
Can I just, before you get started,
Sure.
Norma has her hand up, and I just want to let everybody know that we are going to take questions at the end of our talk. And please feel free to put things in the chat or in the Q&A as well. And we're going to make sure to get to everybody. But thank you.
Thank you for that. So I wanted to start with 2 shout outs. You mentioned Anjali at the beginning, and the story is amazing. And from what you're saying, she's just an amazing and brave young woman. And wanted to also say, like, clarify that even though we do have it, we're very, very lucky and fortunate as a country to have the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, as well as the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which protects students with disabilities. But the fact that we have these laws doesn't mean that there aren't any problems. What it means is that we have a way to fight, or a more clear pathway to fight if problems do present themselves, like what happened with Anjali. And what happened to her at that time, happened to her back then, continues to happen every day. So, you know, she was, you know, you were fortunate to live in the same town that, you know, where she was at, and all these all these wonderful, achievements were made so that this way Elizabeth could um, reap the benefits, right, from all of that. I also wanted to shout out to Caroline, fellow special sibling. It's very tough to be a special sibling. We have we always, and even myself as a professional, I always tend to dwell on the parent. I try to say the family a lot, but for the most part, I always kind of default to parents.
Yes.
And I know that, the family unit is very important in whatever shape or form that would take. But, we have a special place in our families as special siblings. And I can tell you from experience that being a special sibling was a forming experience for me. It kind of, it guided my life in a way that would have been impossible, if I had not been in that situation. But let's go back to parents, since we are basically talking about the role of the parents. And this is another shout out to all the parents out there who have done an incredible job the past few months fulfilling the role of not only of parent. They have been parents, they have been teachers, they have been therapists, they have been everything. And they have been at home dealing with home issues and everything else, all these other responsibilities. But what this pandemic did to parents, should have at least done to parents, is to give them an opportunity, to give them a unique outlook, a unique view of their child. So now they have been granted this lens to look at their children from the point of view of a teacher, from the point of view of a therapist, and at the same time, the parent. So this is a very, very unique opportunity. This is a once in a lifetime chance to be able to have this valuable input, right, in the education of our children, in the education of their children. So typically when we talk about learning in schools, when we talk about learning in general, in education circles and psychology, what we mean by that is a skill that is transferred. What's a skill that is transferred? We learn something somewhere, yes. We learn to put, nesting cups one inside the other. We learn the nesting cups. But what does that teach us? It teaches us to put our bowls in place in the kitchen. It teaches us to, if we're matching and sorting, we're doing an activity with a sorter. What is that teaching us? It's teaching us to separate the forks from the knives from the spoons. It is teaching us skills that we're transferring to the home. And as parents, and having dealt with teaching their children at home, have this incredible, unique opportunity to talk about and see this transfer of skills in the natural environment. You were talking about schools, and the schools, being, a setting with 30 kids, and, for some of our special needs students, it's a smaller setting, but it's different and kind of a natural setting anyway. What we want learning in a natural setting. We want the learning to be carried over to the natural setting. So what happened now? Mom, dad, grandma, caregiver, whoever was there had the very unique opportunity to have this learning take place in the natural environment and see what is really going on. This is a unique outlook. It's a unique view. And this is something that, parents right now should be taking notes and thinking about all these new observations. And in thinking about these observations, what you need to do is look at this amazing document, the IEP, Individualized Education Plan. Why is the IEP this incredible, amazing document? Because this guarantees, as Annette was saying, everything that's on that IEP, your child is entitled to get it, right? Everything that's there, he or she must get, is entitled to, no matter what. No waivers allowed here. You know, your child is entitled to whatever is on the IEP. It's in the law, okay? And I can vouch for me on this. But now that we have been with our children in the natural environment at home, we are looking at the IEP with a different set of eyes, right? With a different lens. Why? Because when the IEP was crafted previously, before, I don't know if I need a light. I think I'm just gonna turn the light on. Just give me 1 second here. All right, a little better, maybe. So when the IEP was drafted before the pandemic, years prior, it was drafted in the school setting. In the school setting, that's not the natural environment where the natural learning is taking place. So the present levels, which is where your child is functioning at the moment, which is one part of the IEP, and the objectives or goals were drafted based on the observations of people that were observing your child in the school. Well, so now you've been at home with your child and you've been observing this learning taking place or not learning, okay?
Yep.
But you've been observing your child and you have a unique perspective of how your child learns in this natural environment. And yes, we know, Annette and I have been talking to parents all this time, and we know that for some parents, it's been incredible. It's been a great experience to have this one-on-one, to have this ability to uniquely transfer these skills. For some other parents, it's been really, really challenging. I want all of you to give yourself a break. I want all of you to think about all that you could do and not the stuff that you couldn't do. None of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. Annette is not perfect. None of us are, okay? Perfection does not exist. And believe me, that your child's teachers are not perfect. Your child's therapists are not perfect. We all learn as we go, and we learn as we observe. And as you observe your child, you start learning. And so we need to, going back to the IEP, we need to think about those things that we learned about observing our children through this process and think about where they stand right now. Where your child stands right now, that's your current present level of performance. So IEPs they're divided in many different parts, but let's talk about the two important ones. Where your child is right now, where we want your child to be. Okay, so these are two very important parts. So this is where your child is right now, where you're observing your child at home with you, your unique observation of what was going on. This is where your child is. This is what you need to bring back to the school, okay? This is where my child is right now. Look at the current goals that are there. Is what you're observing matching the goals? Do we need to go back and change some of those goals? Because let's remember what's the most important thing about learning. The most important thing about learning is, what is my child doing at home? What is my child doing at the community? This is what we want for all of our children, to be able to transfer. And it could be any other environment. What is my child doing at the restaurant? What is my child doing when, well, we haven't gone to the movies in a long time, but
and we're seeing these statements put on the IEP now for everybody that says, oh, well, this is just temporary because we know that we're in a COVID environment and we're just, doing this IEP as a temporary thing right now.
I would just go back and say the same thing that you said, that you as a parent have a voice you are a part of this team. You are always a part of the IEP team, right? The IEP, when you go and you have your child's IEP meeting, it's not just you, it shouldn't be just you and the teacher. It should be you, the teacher, the therapist, anyone that has a stake in your child's education. Everybody should be there. You can bring someone with you. You can bring an advocate with you. You can bring a family member with you. I've had parents that brought the grandparents with them because the parent had a certain input and the grandparent had a different type of input, and that's just fine. Anyone that has an input in your child's education should be there. So it shouldn't just be, a binary approach where you just have a talk with the teacher and that's it. No, it should be a really thought out document where, your child's future depends on this document. It's a legal document, remember, and you have a right to say what goes in there. There shouldn't be anything temporary. I haven't seen for myself any temporary changes. But it's what goes on and what's on the IEP is very important. And if you request, and if you decide to have your child back in school, for us, at least in the Northeast, in September, I know for the rest of the country might be a little bit sooner, and you feel like your child needs to have a review, you have a right to request it. You have a right to request a review the first day your child enters that school. And people are going to tell you, but it's the first day. But remember, you still have a right to request that. It's nowhere in the law that says, oh, but not the first day. Can't request it on the first day.
Yeah.
You can request that anytime you want. So
I like how you point out, because that's on our checklist, that people are going to have observations that their child is doing very different. So the current level of performance for right now at home during COVID could be very different than what they were doing 3 months ago in school. Could be a lot of, they could be very advanced, or they could definitely be, have a lot of regression. So it could go either way.
Goals that are obsolete, you might look at some goals and you might say, but my child has been doing this at home for the past, 6 months or 4 months or whatever the case might be. One of the things I do want to recommend for everyone out there.
Yes, please.
Every time you, first of all, be an active participant in your child's IEP meeting. Be an active participant.
Yes, please.
Ask questions if you don't understand. The professionals are there to guide you. There is a team. We're all on the same team. We all want to see your child succeed. But always ask questions if you don't understand. And the other thing is, please read the IEP when you get it. Please read it through. It's very important because it's a legal document. And I don't want to be loud about this. It's a legal document. You have to read it. If it's something that you don't understand or you don't agree, you have a few days to go back and ask questions or have it changed or request another meeting. I believe it's 10 days. But you have to read that IEP thoroughly when you get it. Again, you don't understand something, you don't have to understand the entire thing. You can always go back and ask questions. Call your child's teacher. Say, hey, I don't understand what this is. Did we talk about this? Did we discuss it? Did we, what did you make? Why did you have this goal here? And you may be very happy with their explanation, or you may want more, but all of that is okay. All of that is okay. On the topic of going back to school,
yes,
and this is a very, very difficult topic. I feel overwhelmed just talking about it myself, and my kids are all grown and they're not going back to school, but I know so many parents who are struggling with this. And so this is really very near and dear to me. And I really wanted to talk about this because, there are the fears that are very, very real, okay? And especially with our population, with the special needs community.
Yeah.
And there are the discomforts.
Yeah.
So I would say sometimes discomfort comes because we have been in this position for a long time, 4 months, I want to say maybe 5, 6 months by the time it's time to go back to school. It's a long time. We've been doing this. We've been teaching our kids at home. We've been doing everything for them. We are kind of secure in our little worlds,
Right.
thinking, well, as long as we're home, the virus won't touch us. And I'm afraid for my kid. I don't want my kid to get sick. I don't want my kid to get sick and bring it to us. Maybe you have someone at home who's fragile or has some kind of a pre-existing condition. Maybe you have another child with a pre-existing condition. So we have to separate the discomfort from the fear. If you're just uncomfortable because it's like an unknown, you're not sure what's going to happen.
Right.
I would say explore a little bit. Get out there safely. Take all the precautions that you can take, that you must take. I have gone out there. I wear my mask. I wash my hands. I keep my distance. I do everything as I should. Was I uncomfortable? You bet. Extremely uncomfortable. Still today, if I see something that makes me uncomfortable, I take distance. If I see people that are not wearing masks when they should, I stay away. I make myself comfortable in the way that I should make myself comfortable, following all the guidelines. You should try to ease that discomfort by easing yourself a little bit at a time out there. So that's what's happening. That's one thing. Then it's the real fear. If you have a real fear because maybe you have a pre-existing condition, maybe your child has a pre-existing condition. A lot of our children with special needs have a lot of health issues. Okay, I know this personally. I know this from being a teacher for many years. I know this from being an administrator. I know this from talking to so many parents all the time. So if fear is what's stopping you, get information, okay? If you feel that, yes, I want my child to go back to school physically, but I'm really, really have this fear, and you name it, my brother, who's now an adult, won't wear a mask no matter what we do.
I know, I saw the video. That was very, very funny.
Yes, I mean, no
Yeah.
matter what we do and what kind of mask it is, he just won't. And it's a very real fear because we're afraid that he goes out there and he gets sick. We're afraid of all the, the laws and regulations. What if he gets out there and people think, he's just someone that doesn't want to do it, doesn't understand what the notion of a person with disabilities that doesn't understand the situation.
Yeah.
So this is a very real fear. Some of my kids could not keep distance, no matter what. You put them together and they're going to hug and they're going to,
Yes.
school is about socialization. A lot of our kids are looking for that. So how do we keep them apart? One of the things that I think about, and I know my parents think about, is how we tend to share a lot of things in school. Right. What are we going to do? Are we going to be supplying our own materials? Are schools going to have separate materials for different kids, for different, adults, or whatever the case may be? Get information. Get all the information that you can get so that when it's time to make the decision, am I going to be sending my child to school or not? Or will I opt for distance learning? Is that an option for me? You have all the tools with you, okay? You have all the tools with you that you need to make this decision. If you still feel uncomfortable after getting all the information, you weighed all the pros and cons, and you feel like, well, I still have this level of discomfort. Maybe sit it out for a while and see what happens,
Yeah.
If you choose online learning now, it doesn't mean you're going to choose it forever. It's not going to be forever. You can choose to do it for the beginning of the school year and then recalculate in October and see what happens. You know, we might be in a different world in October anyway, even here in the Northeast. So
it seems like maybe school's going to open and then close again.
I feel it's an ongoing conversation. This is an ongoing conversation. And
also, distance learning is not the same as online school with your own public school.
Yes.
Distance learning is a separate program. Online school with your own public school is only going to be offered whenever they're available.
Correct.
So if you can't make it when they're available, they're going to set it up. They're going to have, you know, all of the scheduling. And if you can't make it when they're available, that's it.
One thing I wanted to just talk about a little bit is there is homeschooling, online learning, and there's home instruction as well. I'm not sure how home instruction will work with the pandemic, and I'm not sure how it's going to work. I'm sure it worked just the same with, I'm not going to say that because I'm not too sure how that worked for the past few months. But home instruction is when your child has a particular condition that prevents it from going to school. For example, if your child is school phobic, you know, if I'm afraid of crowds, or I'm afraid of going out into the world, I have a phobia and I can't get out, then the teacher comes to my house. I'm guessing the teacher would be online as well.
Yeah, so they're only entitled to, I think it's 1 to 2 hours a day of instruction. Yes. And that's not going to do it for our kids with profound special needs. I mean, not even our moderate special needs kids. They're not going to get everything that they need. We have, you know, when a medically fragile kid, for example, has surgery and is out recuperating for 6 to 8 weeks when they've had hip reconstruction, heel cord lengthening, et cetera, they get nothing. They have a tutor come who basically comes and, you know, reads to the kid. And half the time the teacher doesn't show up, isn't available, gets pulled into something else. It's a disaster. That was before the pandemic.
I'm not sure how that will work right now.
Yeah,
I just know that people, at least people that I have talked to, confuse homeschooling with home instruction, and they want to apply for one and then they apply for the other one. But these two things are not the same. So one, homeschooling is schooling is the entire thing. And home instruction is meant to be just like a Band-Aid solution for the time being.
Somebody has their hand up. Could you go into the chat instead, please? Thank you. I appreciate that. And I will we'll chat back to you.
Somebody was having, is it in the Q&A?
Somebody has their hand up, but we are going to chat instead. So we are at the 7:30 mark, so can we wrap up so we can move to questions? Because we have some questions that have come in, and also if you could get to your final remarks, that would be great.
So I would say my final remarks would be this, two actually. Number one, now that you have this unique perspective on your child, that you have fulfilled all these roles, first congratulate yourself for doing an incredible job. Keep the judgment away. We're going to keep the judgment away. We don't need that, okay? We're going to congratulate ourselves for the job that we did, number one. Number two, remember to take this information, bring it back to the school. Vital that you do this, okay?
Yes, and if you've been able to hit the little record on your Zooms when your kid's getting instruction, that can be really helpful. You smarty pants, you.
Yes, Yeah, so you have something to show for this.
Yes.
And the third thing is to arm yourself with information, to ease yourself out there and look at your comfort level and arm yourself with information. How is it going to be with our special needs kids? Things that tend to be a little more intense. So arm yourself with all the information you need so that you make the best decision possible for you and your child. And that's my message for today.
Are you attendees able to enter the chat? Could somebody chat to me and let me know if you are?
Somebody's entering in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Hey, everybody. Great. Okay, my son has severe autism and I don't know if he can handle another delay. What are our options? Thank you for that question. That's actually very similar to 3 other questions that we got. That is perfect. Thank you so much for that question, because we have 3 other questions just like that, that were sitting from, we got a bunch of questions before the webinar, so I wanted to go through them with you. We're gonna stay about 15 minutes past our time. So,
so this
yeah,
is a
so
really,
somebody said, I don't see other comments in the chat, so thanks for reading aloud. That's why I wanted everybody to answer them. So it's not just the comments in the chat, but it's also, so these are coming in to all panelists, but if you can hit the all panelists and attendees in the chat, then, but I'll keep reading them aloud for sure. And because I want them to also get into the recording, because we are going to post this recording on both of our Facebook pages, and also I think Ingrid's going to pin it on her Pinterest page, and also I'm going to put it on our YouTube channel. So Ingrid and I also did a podcast, so it's on our My Parenting Impossible podcast. That's a very similar topic. I did a podcast on that was more involved about the difference between distance learning, homeschooling, online learning with your school, with your school district, and I'm also going to do something on our YouTube channel about this as well, because as people are needing to make these choices, I want people to understand what they're choosing from. So your options are just that. You have school choice, believe it or not, you really do. And you can pull your child out of your school district to do homeschooling, distance learning, either through an approved private school distance learning, which you can pay for, or you can do a public school, which is completely free to you. And many public schools can accommodate you in a distance learning program, and you can provide other supports through, if you have Medicaid in your state, so you can provide other options. It takes a bit of work to pull together a program for your child, but we've all been there and we all know how to do this for our kids. And then there is, online school with our kids, or you basically can go back to school with whatever the school has set up for the rules and how they're going to function. When it comes to how the school is going to function for safety, that's where you don't have a lot of options, because they are going in accordance with whatever the governor of your state is setting up. And because they are going by, public health rules, there's not a lot of wiggle room there. Although what Ingrid said is true about people not wearing masks, most states are accommodating somewhat for people with disabilities not being able to wear a mask, but not every state is doing that, Ingrid.
Yep. And I'm wondering, I know he's mentioning that his child has severe autism. I know there is parent training on the IEP, at least for all the children on the spectrum. I'm wondering if schools are going to strengthen their parental training on ABA and all these other strategies and techniques that parents can use all day while at home. I wish I could say there is a better answer, because I understand how difficult this is. I do understand how difficult this is at a personal level, to have to deal with this at home. I know. The more training as a parent you have on dealing with, the challenges of autism, the more training you have, the better equipped you're going to be, the less overwhelmed you're going to feel at home. And again, you're going to feel like learning takes place all day. I know this is not the ideal answer that you're looking for. I wish I could say, I have the magic pill, the virus will go away and we'll all be back to normal. I wish I could. But in the meantime, just think about all the options that, that Annette was just talking about, and really think about them long and hard. Think about whether if I'm not sure where you're from, like what state. I know here in the Northeast, most schools are going to be open, most likely, when they will open in September. So they're not right now thinking about a delay. So hopefully you won't have to deal with that. But if not, do think about your level of fear, your level of comfort, and think about all the options that are available to you that Annette mentioned.
So we got a question about links for distance learning.
And the podcast as well, I'm seeing.
So we used K-12, and that program is pretty accessible for higher functioning kids and kids with moderate disabilities. I would not use that program for kids with more profound disabilities. And again, it's a public school program. That's what distance learning is. It's a school program. So I would check them out. Also, I would check out your homeschooling has a lot of supports and a lot of homeschooling networks out there, and they're not as creepy as people make them out to be. They are just groups of parents who are awesome, and they are going to support you to do, to find the resources that you need. So homeschoolers do distance learning. Distance learning is under the umbrella of homeschooling. And, you can start there to find the right program for you. So I would check that out as well. I think they're going to have the resources that you need. If you have a more profoundly disabled kiddo, like my Elizabeth was, who is blind, who is, maybe deaf or hard of hearing, who has some very challenging physical limitations, who maybe has some challenging behavioral limitations, I am not sure that you're going to do well with any kind of prepackaged educational programming. I'm just not sure. I know that I felt really inadequate and not up to the challenge of being able to put a program together and teach Elizabeth. That's not to say that you all would not be able to do that for your child. You do you, I did me, you do you, and I want to encourage you to, to put together a program that fits your family and your kid and your lifestyle. But I certainly did not feel that I could have done that. On the other hand, I'm going to tell you right now that in this day and age with my daughter's medical issues, I never would have returned her to school with COVID, because a virus would kill her. But that is just our situation. I, honest to God, have dozens of families who are itching to get back to school, and I know why. Their kid needs it. They need the structure. Their kid's not at risk. Their family's not at risk, and they know how to be safe, and they're ready to return to school, and that's good for them. Choice and voice. Okay.
Choice and voice. And I want to second what you said about the communities of homeschooling. No, they're not creepy at all. I knew a lot of parents who had to pull their children out of school for many different reasons, none of them being creepy. And believe it or not, a lot of parents, because their children had special needs of one kind or another, and they felt safer in their homes and they felt safer in these communities. So I do want to second what Annette said, and it's, if that's your choice, it's a perfectly fine choice. We are going to leave judgment out the door, and we're just going to like trust ourselves and what we can do. On the other hand, also, if your school
That's
does
right.
open, if you have the opportunity to send your child to school and you can explore your fears and discomfort, and you come to the conclusion that, you know what, I think my child will be safe and like all the precautions are being taken to the best of the school's ability, that there's cleaning protocols in place, safety protocols in place. I don't have anyone in my family, or my child doesn't have any pre-existing conditions. You feel like you can send your child to school, by all means. They're getting ready. Here in New York, we don't start until after Labor Day, and schools are getting ready right now. Especially, I know I used to work in the special education district here in District 75, and I know firsthand they're getting ready with all kinds of different plans. You know, they have plan A, B, C, just to make sure that all their T's, their I's are dotted. The T's are crossed and I's are dotted, just to make sure that everything is safe so you can send your child to school. So if that's a possibility for you, do it for as long as you can. And again, this is an ongoing conversation.
Yep. So you can just start out at homeschool.com and work your way up from there. You know, and definitely check out K-12. It's not an advertisement for them, but it's just a good place to start to get to know homeschooling and distance learning programs. So you were talking about no judgment here. That was one of the questions that we got. So my child did not benefit from remote learning, and she actually regressed. Should I bring it up with the school, and what should I say? And then the other question was kind of similar to that. I feel like I could not manage remote learning and my other responsibilities. Will my child suffer because of this? So those are kind of, you know, the two sides of it, where parents are kind of feeling like the child's not doing well at home. And on the one hand, the parent is openly saying that it's their fault and they're not managing it. On the other hand, the parent was just saying, there's regression, I'm not really sure why. So I've been hearing this a lot. And I just wanted to point back out that, you know, Ingrid was saying, let's not be judgy. Let's just let all of that go. It is very important to report back, as Ingrid mentioned multiple times in her presentation. It's important to just report the facts, Jack, back to the teachers and back through the IEP process, that, you know, here's what happened. And also everybody is going to get the back to school checklist that we drafted, so that you can have something tangible to work from, to be able to report back to through the IEP process. but it's definitely important to, note progress, no progress, and in what areas, and just leave out the fact that, you may or may not have been busy, because we have all been busy. And frankly, the teachers and the administration are going to judge you enough.
We're going to leave that guilt out the door. Yeah, no, guilt is not useful. So we're going to use any emotion. Let's use one that's useful and that's going to propel us forward. We're not going to judge ourselves. That guilt is not going to take us anywhere. Is this going to hurt your child? Is your child going to suffer? This is life.
Yeah. So
life has ups and downs. Life has ups and downs.
The last question that I have is that very similar to what I told you about Caroline, was somebody was working with their child one-on-one and realized that their child needs additional support. So they discovered something that they didn't know before.
How important that is, right?
How do they get started to secure that support? Who do they contact at the school level to get started?
You can get started with a teacher. However, I always tell people, go up the chain. So once you put in a referral for something, the school has to do something about it. They have a limited amount of time to take care of your issue. 60 days if it's an initial IP, for example. But in this case, they have a limited amount of time to take care of this issue. If your child needs additional support, I would start with the teacher. If you don't get anywhere, it's very important to know who your people are at the school. So know who the psychologist is. If you don't know the psychologist, that's fine. Know who the principal is. Always, you have a perfect right to contact the principal. Never feel bad about contacting the principal. I was an administrator. I got contacted many times. I actually was above the principal and they contacted me sometimes and I had to go back to the principal and let them know. And it's fine. I don't care that they didn't care that the parent contacted me. The point is something had to get done. And if it had to be me or the superintendent or the principal, whoever it might be, to get this done, you contact those people. Mm-hmm. My next advice is follow up. Don't let it go to sleep. So you do that, you make this referral, you make this request, you don't hear anything in a week, not even an email back, you follow up. Keep track of every contact that you've made. Because technically, once you contact them the first time, the clock starts ticking. So you have to keep track of everything.
Excellent. Great answer. Okay, a couple more and then we're going to have to close. So somebody asked about, will you post the podcast? The podcasts are all posted on Special Needs Company's website. So you're welcome to go there anytime. They're also in Apple Podcasts, so you can go there too.
You can just Google it, Parenting Impossible. It'll come right up.
They're very easy to find. Anywhere you can get podcasts, they're on Stitcher, they're everywhere. So, and they're all free. And there's no advertisement because that drives me crazy. So I don't have any advertisement. So you can go ahead and look. And if you like the podcast, can you please rate and review it? Because I need more reviews so people can find them. That's my little advertisement. Okay, and then the next question that I have, this is a good one. Lucy, thank you for this. So twins in grade 2 this year have moderate special needs, missed most of the school year due to remote learning and other family issues, want to have them repeat grade 2. What issues are important to bring to the school? Whoa, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get the school to agree to repeat a year. They never want to do that. You have
especially grade 2.
Yeah,
when they're very young.
Because you have to show lack of progress. And even if you show lack of progress, getting them to agree that both children need to repeat a grade, I think that's going to be pretty tough. Sometimes with twins, you can show a lack of maturity, and you might be able to get somewhere with that, but that's more old-fashioned, and I don't usually see that much anymore.
And sometimes it's such a difficult decision for school districts to make, that it's definitely not a teacher's decision at this point when the parent brings it up. It's typically the principal's decision, and sometimes is principal in consultation with the superintendent. So these are very important decisions to make for a school or for a district. They're done at the highest level. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't bring it up. But be prepared, right, for what they might ask and why. So the fact that they did remote learning is not really a reason for that. Like Annette said, you would have to show a great deal of regression or
lack of progress.
Exactly.
The thing that I want to mention is that I see that you're saying that they are having family issues, but if there's any chance for these kids to do homeschooling or a public school distance learning program, they have a better shot of going at their own pace. And that would be much better for them, because then they don't have to get rushed through. I think that might make a lot of sense for kids like this. But of course they would need, at least with the distance learning, they need a facilitator, and that could be an issue for them, depending, because you're saying they have moderate special needs, so it would be tricky to figure that out, and homeschooling might not work for them. Sometimes with homeschooling, if you can get into a homeschool co-op where people can rotate through and take turns, a good homeschool co-op has a circle of parents that can help and take responsibility, but those are hard to find. Depends on the community.
Right.
Are they, is it autism by any chance, Lucy? You and I should talk. I know Lucy. So Lucy, call me. I want to talk to you about these twins. Call me, okay? Okay, well, audience, you have been phenomenal. Thank you to all the people who sent the questions in advance. I also got, just so you know, Ingrid, I got a number of people who said that they could not be here tonight, but wanted to know if we were going to post. So I did tell them that we were recording. Yeah. We are recording and we are going to post. And that is why I did not have anybody speaking, because we're recording. We have to get special releases to record people's voices, which is why we are doing chat and not having people speak on the video. Okay, so as the lawyer in the group, we have to know all of these things, and we can't record people's voices and then put it out there without special permission, yada, 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 yada. So you all have been so great. Thank you so much. Again, this is going to go up on our Facebook pages. It's going to go on to, I think, Ingrid's Pinterest page, yes. my YouTube channel. And we so appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your questions. If there's anything else that you need to know, connect with us on social. We would be happy to answer later. My Twitter handle is, I think it's Annette Hines 15. I can't remember. But you can certainly check me out on Facebook and go to specialneedscompanies.com, and everything is there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everybody. Bye.